SMU's defensive front six is rounding into form at just the perfect time.
You are Locked On SMU, your daily podcast on the SMU Mustangs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Locked On SMU here on a Tuesday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Appreciate you taking the time to make us your first listen and to spend some time with me. I'm Grayson Singleton, and today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. We'll tell you more about them as the show goes on. Speaking of how the show goes on, coming up on the show, we're going to break down the absolute mess that the ACC is and where SMU stands in it, plus what it could mean for the ACC down the line. We'll probably regurgitate this topic a month from now. Also, is SMU in the midst of a trap week? We'll talk about that as well to close up the show. But again, let's go ahead and get started with the front six, because this is becoming, I think, the most dominant part of SMU's team. And look, to me, there's two position groups where you want to be dominant. And I'm going to leave one out. I'm going to tell you the rationale of why I'm leaving it out in just a second. But there's two positions groups that I want them to be so dominant that they're the best unit of your team. Okay? Bookmark that. One of them is quarterback. If the best part of your team is the quarterback, you're doing pretty okay. If the best part of your team is your defensive line, you can go places. You can really, really go places. Look up and down the top 10. You will see exceptional defensive lines. Now, I left off offensive line because if the offensive line is the best part of your team, okay, that's great, but what about the skill position players? What about the quarterback? You see what I'm saying here? Now, it could be so great and that the receivers are still really good, and that could work. But, man, if you have a dominant defensive line and you make teams one-dimensional and then you get after the passer, you are a very, very lethal team. And right now, SMU's best unit is their defensive line. And I know I said front six in there. We're going to talk about the linebackers too, because they're starting to play really, really good. But with the way that Cam Robertson and Turbo Smith have come along, that's a pass rushing duo that you can get behind. And also, by the way, DJ Warner as that rotational defensive end is starting to look better too. But if you go back to the Clemson game, I'm going to give you these numbers. 4 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, and 1.2 yards per carry. That's what Clemson did. And that's what SMU's defensive front did to Clemson. Sacked Chris Vezina 4 times, forced 8 tackles for loss, and SMU only ran the ball for 1.2 yards per carry. And if you're going to say, well, there's sacks involved in there, like, okay, fine. It can be a little misleading because in college, they take sack yardage off of rushing yards, which I hate. Adam Randall ran the ball for 10 carries for 29 yards, 2.9 yards a carry. Antonio Williams got 2 carries, -3 yards. Chris Denson got a carry for 2 yards. Gideon Davis got a carry for 3 yards. They stopped the run. I mean, Clemson was totally one-dimensional, and Chris Vezina was subject to getting hit. I mean, there's no other way around it. And that was the best offensive line they've gone up against this year. It was the biggest, and it was the most physical. And the defensive line won the day. No running game to speak of. Quarterback was being flushed, was being moved off his spot, and that's what you had to do with Chris Vezina. And Vezina, again, had a good game. He was protected at times, but when it mattered the most, they made him skittish. He looked skittish at times, and when he was moving, that's kind of when he was a little bit uncomfortable, particularly because he's not the most mobile guy, even though he's more mobile than I gave him credit for prior to the game. But as it stands right now in ACC play, this team's defensive line has gotten steadily better and steadily better. Why do I want to harp on this now? Why do I want to isolate this now? Because with the quarterbacks that you're going to play, by the way, Wake Forest is included because they've got a quarterback situation that's pretty interesting that we'll talk about on Wednesday. But be it Wake Forest, be it Carson Beck, be it Miller Moss, who's quarterbacking the 19th ranked team in the country, be it whoever they play down the stretch, if they're able to even get to the ACC championship game too, they're going to need to make that guy uncomfortable. They're going to have to. Because I'll tell you what, some of these dudes are not dudes that want to make plays out of the pocket. Carson Beck is Exhibit A. So they are building the foundation for being able to hold down some of these offenses and affect these quarterbacks who are pretty good. They are building the foundation because that foundation does not start with covering receivers. And thank God, because SMU's defensive backfield, still a work in progress. And I'm starting to wonder if we're just going to end up having to say they're just bad. I'm this close to being like, yeah, this isn't a work in progress. The back end is just not good. But if you can affect the passer, and if you can get pressure up the middle, and if you can make guys one-dimensional, it makes it easier on the guys in the back end. It really does. Because all of a sudden, quarterback can't step into his throw. You know they're going to throw the ball, so you're playing coverage. Quarterback is off of his spot, so he might deliver an inaccurate ball. Like, all those things factor in when you've got dudes who can get to the quarterback. And Isaiah Smith now is starting to turn it up. He missed a game earlier in the year. Cam Robertson not only is a veteran leader, but he's also affecting everything on the field. Jeffrey Mba and Terry Webb, the amount of times the camera flashes to those defensive tackles is enormous. Because they are clogs in the run game, and they can get a little push in the pass rush. Like, they are two defensive tackles that can do both. You know, some defensive tackles are experts at stopping the run, but they don't do a whole heck of a lot in the pass rush. Some are good at rushing the passer, but they're not excellent stopping the run. They do both. They show up in both, and they are enormous bodies. So between them and Cam Robertson and Isaiah Smith and the comeuppance of DJ Warner, who I believe had a half sack, he did. This is starting to look really good. This is starting to look really, really good for SMU. And pay attention to that front six. Now, the rest of the front six is the linebackers. And we saw the best game that Alex Kilgore has played in an SMU uniform. We saw that this weekend, leading the team with 11 tackles. We have also seen the continued improvement from Brandon Booker and Brandon Maizano. And when Kilgore and Barker were out early in the year, it seemed as if the linebackers needed to really adjust themselves to the expanded role. They needed to get their feet wet as being starters. And now they're playing heavy snaps. And what has happened? They're looking pretty good. They're looking good in coverage. They're looking good playing downhill. They're looking good as blitzers. They're looking good against the run. And now Kilgore's back and healthy, and he's going to play his usual snaps. Zakai Barker seems to be an afterthought in the rotation. And it's Booker and Maizano. And they're holding up. They're holding up big time. And I'll tell you this. Jeffrey Mba and Terry Webb clogging up all those bodies in there, that keeps the linebackers free. And the fact that they're playing well, I think, has a trickle-down effect to Kilgore, Maizano, and Booker. Why do I bring that up? Because Kilgore had 11 tackles, Maizano had 6, 4 of them solo, and Booker had 4. So when you're keeping the linebackers clean, and the run blocking isn't getting up to them, they can they can now finish up and make the tackles. They also have more energy to tackle receivers in open space. And I don't think it's a coincidence that as the defensive line has gotten steadily better, the overall tackling of this defense has also gotten better. The bye week probably had something to do with it, no doubt. And timing of everything is critical. But the continued play of your defensive line, if your defensive line is being dominant, it makes everybody else's job easier. And you're seeing it in real time with SMU. So you want something that'll tell you SMU can hang with the tops of the top of the ACC? get you a good defensive line. Because I tell you what, you make it to the ACC championship and play Georgia Tech, what are they going to do? Run it straight at you. If you make it hard for them to do that, I'm comfortable if you have to put the ball into the hands of Haynes King to go win a game. Now, I'm not looking over anything. I'm not saying, oh, SMU's a shoe-in for the ACC championship game, but no. But what I am saying is you have the foundation to be able to beat the best teams, and that is to generate havoc up front, and they can do that. And that's only going to keep getting better as the season goes on. Coming up next, what is the ACC? Because it's nothing like we thought it was going to be at the beginning of the year. Let's talk about it on the other side. Let's be honest, most of us can't even name all our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track. And that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your cell phone. It's helped me organize my accounts, track my spending, and get a better handle on my investments, all without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. Monarch's visual data dashboards, and smart tools make it so much easier to understand where my money's going and how to make it work harder for me. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. We're also brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if the bet wins, you can get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. That's right. Just pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 to use however you want in the app. Live game betting, same game parlays, stacking player props into a lineup. You can do it all with FanDuel. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started with FanDuel. Back here on Locked On SMU, I'm Grayson Singleton. Appreciate you taking the time to listen and hang out with us today. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube page at Locked On SMU. Give me a follow at Gray_Singleton2 on Twitter as well. Okay. What is the ACC, and where do we stand right now, and where is SMU standing in all of this? Well, if I was going to describe the ACC as it's currently shaking out, bid thief would be the way that I describe this team, this conference, bid thief. And right now, there are 3 ACC teams that are currently unbeaten in conference play. Georgia Tech, Virginia, and SMU. The one-loss teams are Pitt, Duke, Miami, Cal, and Louisville. Okay. Now, I'll get back to the bid thief part in just a second. But let's all take a moment to recognize that there are more ranked teams in the ACC than we originally thought there were going to be at this point in time. 2 of them, we probably had no idea were going to be that. And that's Louisville and Virginia. Georgia Tech isn't as much of a surprise to me as that they're ranked, more so than they're a top 10 team, borderline top 5. They're 7 in the most recent AP poll. Miami, no surprise there. They started out as a preseason top 10. Virginia, I just never think of as a football school. But this is indeed where we are. Now, where does SMU fit into all of this? And I think they fit in pretty good. Because right now, the top to bottom most consistent team in comparison to their preseason expectation has been Georgia Tech and Virginia. They have played consistently good football the entire year. They've beaten teams that we didn't think they would beat. They've hammered the teams that they were supposed to beat. Okay. Right now, they are undefeated. Miami is a team that has been up and down. Now, I have held to the fact that I think Miami, up until this weekend, obviously, was the second best team in the country behind Ohio State. But they have had their ebbs and flows. They've had their peaks and valleys, but they figured out ways to win games, and that came to an end against Louisville. So, Now you're starting to think with Miami, okay, they go on the road to Dallas. If their peaks show, yes, but if their valleys show, does that give SMU to win that game, a chance to win that game at home? You certainly could say yes. You certainly could. But where SMU stands in the ACC is this. They have a path to the ACC championship. And why is that? Because they don't play the teams that have been the most consistent. Louisville is still Louisville. They could beat you, but you could also beat them. Especially because, if I remember correctly, and I'm going to go back this just to make sure, that game is in fact in Dallas. Okay, so you're going to have that sort of an advantage over Louisville. You also have the game in Dallas against Miami. Up and down game. You have a pretty feasible path now that you've gotten through Death Valley. You have a pretty feasible path to being undefeated in the rest of the regular season. That path is there, especially for a team that is getting better. You also have to look at it from this perspective. Virginia has games at North Carolina and at Cal. The at Cal game is interesting to me because you have to go cross country to play that game. And I'm sorry, if you think Cal isn't very good, I'm in the boat with you. But if you think that game is anything sure, you are wrong. Because there have been a number of wild things that have happened when teams fly from one coast to the other. By the way, you know what time that game will likely be played at Virginia time? That game could easily be played at 10 o'clock Virginia time. Keep that in mind too. That means something, okay? So Virginia's got a tough go of it. Georgia Tech, I think, is clear-cut the best team in the ACC, so we'll leave them alone. But if you're SMU, the rest of your schedule shakes out favorably enough for you to be able to get back to the ACC championship game if you win all your games. Now, where else could SMU fall into this in terms of being a bid thief? There could be a bid thief in the ACC because the champion could be SMU, it could be Louisville, it could be Virginia. If Georgia Tech goes unbeaten the rest of the way and loses the ACC championship game, Georgia Tech's in the playoff. If Miami goes unbeaten the rest of the way and figures out a way to get to the ACC championship game and loses, Miami is in the playoff. Okay, so that means that opens up the door for 2, maybe 3 teams out of the ACC getting in. Right, so say Georgia Tech loses one game and ends up not participating in the conference championship. I would bet that they're in the college football playoff. Okay, so let's just say Georgia Tech is not in the ACC championship game, one lost Power 4 team, you're in. That means you're going to have a situation where Miami and somebody else, possibly SMU, could be in the ACC championship game. Now let's say SMU wins that. Automatic qualifier, and Miami would be a 2-loss team that appeared in the conference championship. They're in. All right, that is already more teams in the college football playoff from the ACC than we otherwise thought. That's a quarter of the playoff gone this year. That's why I think the ACC is going to be the bid stealer conference, because there's a lot of scenarios where 3 ACC teams could be in the college football playoff. There's a lot of them. Now, are they going to take a 9-3 ACC team over a 9-3 SEC team? Probably not. But if you got a bunch of ACC teams that have 2 losses or 1 loss, that throws chaos into the whole picture. Now, how can SMU, I'll close up this segment with this. How can SMU be that team? It's quite simple. Playing defense. Of the teams that are undefeated in the ACC right now, the Mustangs have given up less points in conference play than all of them. They've given up 52. As a matter of fact, I'm double checking this, that is second best in the ACC, only to a Miami team that has given up 46, but only played 2 games. So in terms of points per game in conference play, Miami's given up 23. SMU has given up 23. They're right there. They've been the best defense scoring-wise in conference play. So There's your hope, there's your reasoning, and there's your path. It's all there. SMU could still find its way into the playoff, but getting past that game against Clemson was step one. And step two, as we transition to this, is going to be getting past the team this week, because is SMU due for a trap game? We'll talk about that to close up the show next. We're brought to you today by Game Time. College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, everything associated with college football, you just love it. But sometimes getting tickets to the game is more of a battle than the actual game itself. You know, the hidden fees, the prices that jump inexplicably at checkout, all of that. You know, we know how that works. But that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. The app makes it super simple, and the best part about it is that you can see your exact seat view in a 360 view, by the way, before you even buy the ticket. And in a couple of taps in the Game Time app, you can see amazing deals like tickets for college football games as low as $25. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. Hey, one more segment here on Locked On SMU. I'm Grayson Singleton, and is SMU about to embark on a letdown game? This is an evergreen topic for a lot of teams around the country. And let's give the context here, because it's pretty damn simple. You just beat Clemson. A game that I talked about on Monday was Rhett Lashlee's signature win. Emotional game. Everybody, revenge game for the ACC championship. You go in and you win that game, and you thoroughly look like the better team. On the horizon is a game against Miami. But sandwiched in the middle is a second consecutive week on the East Coast. And by the way, I'll get back to that. But those are three things that could psychologically work against you in terms of making sure that you're buttoned up and ready for the game that you have to play. Now, all that said, is SMU equipped to deal with it? I would say yes. And the reason I would say yes is virtue of what the Mustangs had to do last year. Some of you will remember this, but if you don't, let's go back to a stretch last year from October 5th to October 26th, where SMU did not play a home game. As a matter of fact, the entire month of October, SMU did not play a home game last year. The road games were at Louisville, then you had a bye week. Then you were at Stanford, and then at Duke. SMU won every single game in that slate, in that stretch. 7-point win over 22nd ranked Louisville, blew out Stanford, and then won in overtime by 1 point over Duke. Now, why does that matter, especially the Duke part about this? Is because second week in a row on the East Coast, there is a chance that we expect SMU to win this game, yes, but there is a chance that it's a lot closer than you want to admit. And Wake Forest is a pretty good team. They're 4-2 on the year. They've been a quiet 4-2, just dominated Oregon State over the weekend. But when you talk about scheduled losses in the NFL, that's usually an NFL and NBA thing. But it's starting to become more and more applicable in college because of conference realignment. So, second weekend in a row that you're on the East Coast against a team that you're better than, that can sometimes shift the games in a manner that is a lot closer than you otherwise would think. This plays into the hands of Wake Forest, by the way, because Wake Forest is coming home. Now, Wake Forest, I believe, was at Oregon State. I believe that's what I saw. And I'm correct. They've been on the road for 2 straight weeks. The first week was Virginia Tech, and then last week was Oregon State. So they're coming back home off of a tough stretch. So this works in their favor. However, Rhett Lashlee and this staff has experience with dealing with this. And if there's one thing from last week that taught me something that makes me more confident going into this game, it's that no matter the circumstance, Lashlee and his crew, once conference play rolls around and they have a really good feel as to what the team is, they can get the dudes ready to play. And this week, there is one word that's going to stand out to me more than the rest. I know they'll be game ready. I know they're going to be ready to play in terms of a game plan. I know they're going to be ready to adjust once the game goes on. The one word to me for this is going to be recovery, recovery, recovery. Because you flew back from Clemson, South Carolina, and you got to go to Wake Forest in North Carolina this week. You have to recover. It is imperative that their recovery is top-notch all week long. Because if they don't recover, that flight over there is going to feel a little bit different, and then you're going to have to acclimate yourself once again to a new time zone, unless they stayed over there, which I need to double-check on that. Unless they stay over there and do the recovery there, that makes this a lot easier. But you're using unfamiliar facilities, and you're in an unfamiliar environment. Either way you slice it, if they come home first or if they just stay on the East Coast, either way you slice it, the recovery process is going to be accelerated, either physically because you got to get back on a plane or mentally just because you're not home. So you got Kevin Jennings, who's banged up. PJ Williams got banged up in the game against Clemson. Obviously, you got your big offensive and defensive linemen who are colliding with other big offensive and defensive linemen the entire game. Guys in the secondary getting shaken up a little bit. Jordan Hudson still recovering. He's still wearing a ginormous brace. You need to make sure that the recovery is on point. I have no doubt, because of the leadership that's on this team and over this team, I have no doubt that they're going to be focused and buttoned up game plan-wise. I have no doubt they're going to be focused detail-wise in practice. But the players' bodies is what I'm a little bit concerned about with trips like this. And every team's going to have this in the schedule where you're going to make these trips cross-country and you're going to be there for back-to-back weeks. Every team in the ACC is going to have it because the conference covers the entirety of the United States of America. The Big Ten is like this too. But can you recover and can you get your body right to be able to play another 60-minute football game in 7 days when you're far away from home? And that goes for whether or not they come back to Dallas and go back out there or whether they stay there. It's still the same thing. Either this timeline has to be accelerated because you're getting off of a plane and then going back on a plane, or you're somewhere away from home for that long of a period of time. Either way, it's going to be a challenge. And I've got no doubt Rhett Lashlee is going to coach this team up to be ready, but it's up to the players to go the extra mile and take the extra effort to make sure I'm physically ready to go. So that's why this could be a trap game. Yes, there's the emotional part of it. You don't want to overlook Wake Forest and look ahead to Miami. You don't want to rest on your laurels too much from winning the game at Clemson. But physically, this is going to be a challenge for SMU. And we'll talk more about that later on in the week. All right, that'll do it for Locked On SMU here on a Tuesday. I'm Grayson Singleton. Thanks for watching. By the way, make sure you check out our Locked On ACC show on YouTube. Kenton Gibbs and Alex Dono break down the most interesting conference in college sports, from the rivalries to the championships and every game in between. Find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. All right, that'll do it. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Take it easy, everybody.